that is something that I think athletes, particularly in combat sports, really have to master, is operating at their best in the presence of fear.
You know what nobody tells you about checking every box? Nobody tells you that you can build a career, hit the numbers, earn the title, stack up every win you were told to chase, and still feel like something's off. Like the engine's still running, but that it's running on fumes. Most guys I talk to, that's where they are. They're not failing, they're succeeding, and yet they're exhausted by it because somewhere along the way, they stopped leading their own life and started managing it, putting out fires, going through the motions, telling themselves that the fog and the fatigue are just what happens when you get older. But that's not aging, that's rotting. And there's a difference. I'm Zach Armstrong, and this is no hype, just standards. And for over 20 years, I've helped high-performing men realign body, mind, and spirit without the burnout. Today is a different kind of episode. I'm not sitting down with a client. I'm sitting down with someone who has been studying the same problem I see in my practice, but from a completely different angle. Jess Sargus is an Ivy League trained attorney who has worked at Marvel Studios and Disney, a 3-state bar licensed attorney with 23 years in high-stakes legal and business roles, an undefeated MMA fighter, and a certified mental performance mastery coach. She built a science-based framework called Fierce Agency that teaches high achievers how to think like an elite athlete, but not to run faster or to hit harder, but to lead themselves in the same precision and discipline. What caught my attention is that she's seeing the same thing that I see, high-performing people who perform and do everything right on paper, but yet they still feel like they're running on empty. And her answer isn't more hustle. It's not another goal-setting worksheet. It's a system, a daily operating system for your mind that mirrors what you do for your body. That's a conversation worth having. If this conversation hits home for you, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us to reach more people who need to hear this. All right, let's get into it. Hey, Jess, thanks for joining us today. Wanted to really, we appreciate you coming in. I know it's a long way away from Texas. Wanted to jump right into it. So you went to an Ivy League law school, practiced in 3 states, spent time at Marvel Studios and Disney, as well as a global tech company. Walk me through that path, how someone gets there to building a performance psychology framework.
Sure. So the path is, it looks like there's a lot of pivots.
Yeah.
And there are, for sure. The through line for me has always been growth and challenge. And so every time I've pivoted, it has been on that path of there's something else that I want to learn. There's a different way that I want to challenge myself. So my original path was pretty traditional, pretty linear. I went to a great liberal arts college. That's where I studied neuroscience, social psychology, psychology of leadership, as well as political science, basically psychology of groups, right? And so I went to law school from there, graduated, and started working as a corporate litigator, doing a lot of product liability and commercial litigation, et cetera. And I did that for 12 years. But my first big pivot was realizing that I really didn't like the causes I was fighting for when I was on that side of the V. And the last 4 years of being an attorney at that firm, I'd also started my own boxing and mixed martial arts gym. And for the first time, I was an entrepreneur, and I was mixing law and business. How do I guide my business best? And I realized that was what I really loved. I loved the problem solving. I loved the entrepreneurship, and I loved
definitely relate to that.
Yeah, working on something that I was passionate about. So my passion has driven me from there. It drove me from the law firm to selling my gym in Philadelphia, moving to Las Vegas, and fighting the most frequent fighting of my career. Finished up in Las Vegas. And then when I retired from there, I went back to law, but this time fighting for the little guy. Really appreciated that, honed my negotiating skills, but I missed building. I think also getting a message out into the world where it called upon people to really tap into the better angels of their nature. And that was how I ended up going to Marvel, moving from New York then at that point to LA, and working for Marvel and Disney. Again, it was amazing getting to challenge myself in a new way, negotiating with like the Ari Golds of the world
Yeah.
for these movie contracts and TV series and streaming. And when I was there at Marvel, I got the opportunity to be legal hire number one at Jelly Smack, which is a social content tech company, and build their entire legal function. And it was a challenge that I really wanted. I could build all of their legal policies, their forms, lead the negotiations for their bet the company first big deals. I got to, do the negotiations for PewDiePie, for Mr. Beast, for all of these big names, and really use everything in my toolbox that I developed up to that point about negotiation, about how do you structure a content business so that it will grow and be on the right side of
Yeah.
all of the laws. And it was really growing that team. It was an international team. The founders were all French. Half of our executive team was in Europe. Our US team was concentrated in LA, but all over. So I built a team from legal hire number one to a team of 13, across 8 different time zones, 3 different primary languages. And that was where I really started applying more intentionally everything that I'd learned in psychology as an athlete, as a manager and coach for other athletes, and seeing how it fit so seamlessly and perfectly into building a high performing team, and helping people be their best high performers as well as individuals.
Right. And if you'd asked me this morning what was the chances I was going to have an entourage reference, I would have said 0.
Yeah.
I love the Ari goal being thrown in there. So a couple questions come from that. One, did you get to meet anybody famous off the Marvel Studios?
Usually I was negotiating with their people.
So
I got to do some really big name, all the names,
Sure.
contracts. The star that I actually got to meet though was happenstance. We were at a premiere for one of the last season of Jessica Jones at the time. And Carrie Ann Moss is in that series.
Right.
And so I was going to the ladies' room and I saw Carrie Ann Moss come the other way and she held the door for me. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you. And she was just lovely. But that was my only work
Interaction.
related.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Second off, from somewhat you said, you mentioned something saying that you use the term through line.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the through line, when we're going to cross those roles from, multiple types of law, right, that you practice there. They all have kind of a similar thing in how they operate, though, at the end of the day. What is your through line between those roles to going into being an MMA fighter to a book writer? What are those through lines there?
For me, it's strategy. Everything in law, and in boxing and mixed martial arts, you're assessing where your strengths feed into your opponents or your adversaries' weaknesses.
Sure.
And
Exploitation.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
How do you exploit their weaknesses? How do you take advantage of your strengths? And so that strategy, that mindset, and frankly, the competitive nature of it, really is something that resonates with me throughout. And so, I think having that strategic mindset in an athletic context, it really transfers over to the professional context too. Because once you start seeing the world in this way, you just start analyzing it in that way. Like the Terminator with their little goggles on, he sees and assesses.
Yeah.
Assesses. That's once you start seeing, all right, how do I maximize this potential, or how do I minimize that risk? It really flows across all areas of your life. So for me, that's the through line of law and fighting, And growing a business even is you have to assess where you're strong, where you're weak, and make a strategic plan for it. And then be agile enough when that plan, something goes wrong
Yeah.
to reassess and make adjustments.
Adapt and overcome. Definitely a Marine Corps
Yeah.
thing that we learned. Semper Gumby is what we say.
Ah,
Be flexible. Be
I
flexible.
haven't heard that
Yeah.
before.
Instead of Semper Fi, Semper Gumby. 23 years of high stakes, legal and business environments obviously has a toll, and it does something to a person over time.
Mm.
For you or, the people that was around you, what do you think that kind of environment does to someone over that amount of time, and what does it cost them?
That's a great question. Being in an environment like that, it's a natural draw for high achievers. And I think when you are in an environment, particularly where your value, in a sense, is measured by wins and losses,
Yeah, or
right?
money.
Right, or
Yeah,
money.
yeah.
You start measuring your life in that way, and that can be a very hollow way to measure your life.
Yeah.
It also sets you up for feeling like you constantly have to be hustling, on your job, on your projects, and not taking care of yourself. And I know we're gonna talk about this too, but not restoring the energy that you need in order to actually be great at what it is you're
Yes.
doing. You're just in that grind mode, and because you are defining yourself by your outputs rather than your process, it can feel, even when you achieve what you think you want to achieve, it can feel pretty empty and pretty lonely.
Because you're off to the next one.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. When you notice the people around you in those environments, and obviously you can't give an exact measurement, but what kind of divorce rates or overweight type people or just unhappy people did you notice in those environments?
It's it's really a scary thing, because once you hit a certain level, we'll say like 8 to 10 years in the profession, unless people have made it a priority to take care of themselves, so much overweight, so many cardiovascular
Yeah.
issues, like extra alcohol use. There's a lot of dysfunction, interpersonally, lots of divorces. There is a real, I'll say, epidemic of mental health and physical health issues with a lot of high performers, because they just pour everything into defining their success as a human being as their success professionally.
Mhm.
And it requires a lot of hours, depending on the type of law, like trial law. Sometimes things happen last minute. You're on call 24/7. You're not getting sufficient sleep. It was one of the reasons why I ended up leaving mass torts practice, because I was always on the road. I was always getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. We were eating restaurant food. The team was drinking to relax after the end of a very stressful day. And then, every day was the same thing. And when that is the lifestyle, that's almost, culturally expected. Like, this is how a
Yep.
trial lawyer is, right? It's very hard to carve out something different for yourself. So there's a lot of also time pressures in law firms, and across business too. Building a business, you feel like you always have to be on, you always have to be available. And those are mistakes. It's very easy for a high achiever to make. Like that, it's inexhaustible.
Yeah.
Your drive to try to check those boxes.
It's almost like I think a good way to put it is a lot of times when you walk around somewhere and you can just miss the beauty of things because you're paying attention to something certain instead of everything that's around you.
Yeah,
Right? I
yeah.
just picked you up from Mission Bay this morning. If we sat there and like just looked at something, we would have missed everything that was going on and the beauty that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's easy to do in life.
It is.
You were an undefeated MMA fighter. Let's get to something that's awesome. How does someone who is a practicing attorney end up in a cage?
They have something wrong with them. Is what happens.
That Groundhog Day gets old. We
Yeah.
got to go take it out on somebody else, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I discovered boxing in law school. A friend of mine brought me to a class, and I'd grown up on a horse farm, lifting bales and wrangling horses that are 1,000-pound animals when you're, a tenth of their weight. And so I had a lot of like weird farm girl strength. I was very strong. So when I started boxing and I discovered, wow, I can really hit this thing pretty hard.
Yeah.
It was a combination of I loved learning the strategy for the first time because before I started training, I didn't know there was a boxing strategy. I thought it was like make the other
Hit 'em
person
hard.
fall down, hit them hard, right?
Yeah.
Right. There's no footwork or anything. But I started learning about it as the physical chess game that it is, and having some natural gifts allowed me to excel in it. So I'm good at this. I'm going to keep
Of
doing
course.
this
Yeah.
as well. And so I just kept training. When I was working at the law firm, it was pretty conservative. And for the first 10 years of my work, I just trained in the gym. I didn't compete because they would have been very upset if I showed up for, a meeting with a client with a black eye or
A little
something
bit.
like that.
Yeah.
But it got to the point 10 years in, it had some life changes as well, where I decided I no longer cared what they thought about it and signed up for my first boxing competition and just started getting to be friends with more true competitors in boxing and mixed martial arts. And that's when I felt compelled to really find out, am I being patronized when they say you could be good at this, or could I really be good at this? Could I do this? And I want to know. I don't want to waste my time here. I don't want to wish that I had challenged myself in that way. My parents definitely did not understand.
Yeah.
You have a good job. Like you're an Ivy League trained lawyer. Why are you going to go move to Las Vegas and start fighting in cages more? And I'm like, well, I need to do it.
Need to do it. Got to check that box. Speaking of that, you compete and manage and coach combat athletes at the highest level.
Yeah.
What did you see in fighters that you were not seeing in the boardroom?
I think fighters, they have to become excellent at operating in the presence of fear. And you know this from your career as well, is that it's not that there's no fear. Courage comes from having that fear and being able to function
and face it
anyway. Face it, let it be a passenger, but not a driver of your actions, of your decision making. And so that is something that I think athletes, particularly in combat sports, really have to master, is operating at their best in the presence of fear. Too often, I think in boardrooms, risk is seen as something that they're just not willing to take. They're not willing to strategize, and they're trying to minimize some risk, and it can become kind of an over focus of like, well, what is the risk of this, rather than like, hey, let's actually figure out what are the chances, like what is the risk that we're willing to take, and are we willing to fail in order to succeed in a big way. It's one of the other things that I think athletes are really great at, is understanding that failure is feedback. It's not, a destiny. If you fail one time, that it's not all over. I think entrepreneurs that are successful have that as well.
100%. It's very much the, and I've said this before on here, is, whenever you look at a hero's quest, they never usually come from, this great life in which they were succeeding. It was always some humbleness that created their adversity, or, deaths in the family, all these things that happened to make them that person, and the failures that happened to make them that hero.
Yeah.
And I believe that's a part of life. If you face those things, overcome those things, it makes you a better person. It makes you the better hero.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. I think it forces you to tap into what's really important.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're aligned with what's really important, I think that's when you do great things.
And people listen.
Yeah.
And people listen because they can hear it in you.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you decide coaching and self-leadership was where you needed to go full time?
It was my last stop in the legal field. Specifically, I was chief legal officer for a personal injury firm in Austin, where I was responsible for helping the team succeed in each of their roles, as well as helping the law firm succeed. And I realized in the course of that what I had loved most about my prior roles as an executive at Marvel, at Jelly Smack afterwards, was I loved helping people narrow the gap between their potential and their performance. So when I realized that like this is the part I really love. I like being able to help lawyers help people. That's always something that is important to me. Is having somewhat of a role in allowing people to help those who are most in need. But I like to help the helpers. And so I saw the huge difference that it can make with just some very subtle mindset shifts in both how people perform and also how they feel about their life and how they feel about their success, and really turning them into the people that they want to be, the best versions of themselves. We all define for ourselves what is the best version of me,
Yeah,
right?
and when we're talking about that, you talk about high achievers right there, and you're talking about a lot of times in a short verbiage of what you're saying is they try to check every box,
Right.
but they're still feeling empty,
Yeah.
and you're trying to get into that potential. What is actually going on there that they're feeling this way?
It's We'll talk about extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation. I think a lot of high achievers start to see their productivity as the proof of their worthiness
Mm-hmm.
rather than just the product of us being worthy because we're human, because we exist. And so I think when you get tied up in my output is my proof that I am worth
Worth it.
anything,
Yeah,
right?
that value.
That it just becomes this never-ending cycle of there's never enough. There's always another box to check if someone else extrinsically outside of yourself is saying this is what success looks like. And you can follow that path because that's what they say success looks like, but it doesn't feel like
Because
success
what's
for
often
you.
missed there is like we see that.
Yeah.
Like if I watched a person and said, "Oh, that's the person I want to be," I want to mimic them because of what I see as their success.
Hmm.
We don't know what on the other side of that door actually looks like in their life,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
We don't know
Too
how it
often, like
feels.
if like an example would be like Robin Williams. Like if anybody looked at him from an actor perspective, that's exactly who I want to be. Like
Hmm.
he's beloved, not just a great actor, but
Yeah.
beloved.
Yeah.
But something was going internal to where it was not, and
Mhm.
so like we never know what that other side looks like or feels like, and so I think it's important when you say that too. Right?
Yeah.
Is always be careful what you're trying to measure because you never know what you're actually measuring.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that goes back into like what I'm talking about with measurement. A lot of the men I work with, everything's external measures, what you just said, but the body is breaking down. The mind is foggy. They've been telling themselves that this is what getting older is supposed to look like. From your perspective, what is driving that?
Um, I mean, particularly for people who are high achievers, we're competitive, right?
A little bit.
We're a little bit competitive. We wanna do as well or better than our peers, people we consider our peers or role models. And so it's very easy to go down that comparison spiral,
Yes.
right? Right? Which we know is the thief of joy. When you define yourself versus someone else, it's always going to be less satisfying than when you define yourself as, all right, am I living up to my expectations? Are my words and actions aligned with my actual beliefs? That's what I think real success is. But too often it's, all right, well, do I have the big house? Do I have the car? Do I have the title? Do I have the money that so and so has? And when you get there,
You
you can
find out
check.
it might not be all.
It might not be all that, and unless you've taken care of yourself, well, what do you have? If someone takes away the car, if someone takes away the money, if someone takes away the lifestyle, what are you left with? And that's a really hollow, ringing sound when you
Right.
realize I don't know who I am outside of those
Yeah.
definitions, those
That's how they define
achievements.
themselves.
Yeah.
And you just made your distinction there between living life
Mhm.
and leading your life, right?
Yes.
What are the differences there you in practice, like living versus leading?
Living is for me is far more reactive, and leading is proactive.
Right. That makes sense. And so, you have your 5 pillars with your book. Can you kind of break those through, walk them through me, not the textbook version, but just kind of You speaking on behalf of them?
Sure, sure. So my system of self-leadership I call fierce agency, which is basically being an unapologetic leader for yourself. I have 5 core principles. They're the pillars. For me, they are the basics of what I consider the elite athlete mindset. They're simple, not easy, but they're simple ways that I think are fundamental to allowing you to lead yourself well each day of your life. And we know that our life is the sum of each day, right? So the first pillar is a growth mindset.
Sure.
That's the belief. Carol Dweck, a psychologist, had come up with this concept. The belief that through learning and through effort, we can improve, we can grow, we can change. A fixed mindset, you believe you have a certain set of attributes, and that's your ceiling. You will never exceed it. So in a certain way, why try, right?
Keep yourself down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a growth mindset believes, hey, if I apply myself, I can be continuously
Sure.
improving. That's number 1. Number 2 is action orientation.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that, it's not that you're just always doing, but I mean that uh, when you are faced with a decision and you might have imperfect information or imperfect readiness, you are biased towards acting anyway, rather than staying stuck in over-analysis.
Yes.
Because when you act, even if it doesn't work out the way you want, you are in motion. It's so much easier to pivot from motion than from stillness, right? Physically and mentally.
From a reactionary standpoint.
Exactly.
Right.
So action orientation is very important, that you are in the face of uncertainty, you're going to act, and then you're going to figure out the next step from that next step
Yeah, it's a
you've
necessity,
taken.
right?
Right?
I'm sure that comes from the boxing there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So that's number 2. Number 3 is present moment focus.
okay.
Because we can't stay stuck in the past. We can't affect what happened. We don't live in the future. We're not there yet. The only time that we can actually make an impact on how our lives go, how are they proceeding, is here in the present moment.
Oh, and I struggle with that. I know most people probably do.
Yeah.
Especially high achievers, because we are always what happened, what's in the future, not now.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's very easy for those to go down. We want to be analytical, right? We do want to take information from our past, and we do want to project in the future and say, how do I think this is going to work out? But when we overplay in that, when we're ruminating about what went wrong in the past, or when we're catastrophizing about what might go wrong in the future, it's very easy for depression or anxiety to get in there. But when we're in that present moment, I think an expanded version of this is when you find yourself in flow, when you're running on the beach, or when you're working in a piece of art or something. You're in that moment.
Right.
You're able to fully live in that moment, and that's where greatness happens.
Agreed. And then for the fourth one?
The fourth one is a focus on process over outcome.
I love that one.
That's
me.
This
is me.
It's the hardest one.
I'm a process guy.
But the way that I explain this is the fighters that I found who were the most successful were not the fighters who were saying, I want to win that fight.
Yes. They don't focus on the result.
They don't. They're like, I want to be the best fighter I can possibly be.
Right.
And so because that was their focus, not like, yeah, all right, I would like to win that fight, but I'm doing that by becoming the best fighter I can be, and the win takes care of itself, right? Or if it doesn't, I know I've put my all into every day.
Yes.
And that's how I think it was also possible for them to maintain a super high level of commitment every day, because they're about that process.
Not the result.
Not the result. They're like, I got better at this today. And then
I love that so much. But I tell my employees that, I tell people that worked for me in the past, like, hey, a famous coach, Nick Saban, is the same person. He never focused on the Saturday, the game. He always focused on, hey, from Sunday to that game, what is the process we do? What do we do on Monday? What do we do on Tuesday? What do we do on Wednesday? We focus on those things. We don't pay attention or think about Saturday. But when we get there, we're ready. And that's the same thing I try to tell people. When you focus on the process, the day-to-day functionality, working on the result usually comes.
Yes.
And what is that number 5 for you?
Number 5 is mission alignment. That is tapping into your purpose. And going back to fighting again, the fighters who want to be the best fighters they possibly could be, that was their purpose. Their purpose was excellence, or their purpose was, I want to show my family what's possible. You know, when you can align what you're doing with something that is meaningful to you outside of, you know, those check boxes, but actual real purpose. How do I want people to talk about me at my funeral, right? It's not
Great analogy there.
that I spent a lot of time, a lot of
That quarter
hours.
3 revenue was this in
Exactly.
2020. You
No,
think that's being read at the funeral?
no, there are no PowerPoints of like, oh, look at this revenue. Wow.
Yeah.
No, it's what kind of a father were they? What kind
Friend.
of a friend were they? You know, what experiences did they have in their life? And it's not going to be, well, they had a really great executive meeting on that Thursday. No, it's going to be the time spent and what they've learned and how they
Or what they
had
taught.
right, and how they had an impact on others. How
Right.
did they help others? And so I think when you have a mission, it's also much easier for you to stay devoted to staying on that path, right? Than getting distracted and straying off of it.
At what point did you decide that coaching and self-leadership was where you needed to be full-time?
That was after my chief legal officer role. I felt like my mission in life, and I did a lot of extra thinking and reading and journaling about it at the time. I realized that my mission in life was to help other people lead themselves well.
And we'll go right to that, right?
Yeah.
You said that you cannot lead yourself well if you feel like garbage.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Well, it's true. I mean, just think about it. We're never at our best if we feel tired, if we feel stressed, if where our energy levels are low. We simply can't give the best of ourselves either to what we want to do or helping others.
And how does that connection with the mental aspect, you think, matter or play a role?
Well, it's kind of like having multiple programs running in the background. Like if your brain is a computer, you've got a lot of memory being used for, oh, this hurts. I don't like this. I feel a little sick. I'm really tired. All of those other programs are running in the background, and it's taking away your focus and your acuity of what it is you actually want to accomplish. It's so much easier to be dialed in to that present moment, to take action, etc., when you're not being distracted by how poorly you feel, how your relationships aren't going well. I think of these in terms of energy as well. You know, where am I leaking energy? Is my emotional life in a mess right now? That's going to leak energy away from where I want to be. Or
Sure.
my physical health, again, like I don't feel well. I physically don't feel well. I don't feel like I have the energy to do what I need to do.
It's like what you talked about. Like there is a point, and we all know, we've all said this verbiage before. Anybody who is, there's a point of diminishing returns, and if you're going through that 3 or 4 hours a night of sleep, and you're drinking to get back that relaxation after, you know, like your buddies and you were after on the trips, right?
Yeah.
At some point, that diminishing return starts affecting everything that you said.
Absolutely.
So you're running on empty, right? And then when you're running on empty, it's usually a physical problem that has not been addressed. What are some of these physical problems that you've noticed through all these coaching and the training and your 5 pillars?
Sure. Cardiovascular issues, very, very common. High blood pressure. There's real symptoms of this kind of burnout where your critical thinking is impaired. You start to think very negatively as well, cynically. And that affects both how you view your work, how you strategize in it, and also how you deal with others, both professionally and personally, and things like that. So there's cynicism, depression, also, you're not thinking at your best. It's all of these different ways that your executive function is being hampered, on top of not getting enough sleep so that your brain literally can't repair itself the way that it needs to.
Recovery is bigger than people think, right?
Yeah, it's so hugely important. And people start to treat themselves like they're machines. And we're not. We're organic beings, right?
With a T.
It's like I can't exhale in perpetuity, or I will die. At some point, I have to inhale again.
Yeah.
There has to be this oscillation between energy output and recovery and restoration, because otherwise that bar's down here. You're not going to be able to make the strides that you want to. So it is just a fact. Like even building muscle, right? You have to allow the muscle to repair in order to get stronger. Same thing for people mentally, same thing in any physical aspect is you have to build in recovery as an intentional part of your high performance.
And I think that's a good thing to go because, you say if you have a brain, you can learn to train like an
Yes.
athlete.
Yes.
What does that mean for you, or what do you mean when you say that to people?
Well, I'm referring back again to those elite athlete mindsets, right? You don't have to know how to shoot a free throw in order to be able to practice focusing in the present moment, in order to be able to practice, all right, I'm thinking about my process over my outcome, in order to practice taking action in the face of uncertainty. You don't have to be able to throw a great punch, all you have to do is be intentional about, all right, I understand I'm starting to go down a different path. It's not a productive path. I'm going to bring myself back. All right, what is the most important thing to do right now? This is my present moment focus. What do I do right now? What's important now? And so I think being able to think about yourself as an athlete, it also turns it from something where someone's like, well, this sounds a little soft. This sounds a little woo woo. No, this is strategic. This is when you think about yourself as an athlete, then you start to see, all right, I am choosing to better myself. I'm choosing excellence. I'm choosing challenge. And so I think, Nike says if you've got a body, you're an athlete. I say if you've got a brain, you're an
I like
athlete.
that better. And so when you're talking about those changes, what is something small that someone can start with a change?
For me, I think probably the smallest change you can make is taking a moment each day, whether it's 1 minute or 5 minutes, to get in touch with yourself. Because we spend so much time, all right, I got to do this, I got to do that, we've got a list. We don't take a moment simply to breathe and to say, all right, how am I feeling today? Or what is the one thing that I really want to accomplish today that will make today a win? Taking that moment to be in touch with yourself, I think sets you up to stay aligned with what you really want to do, what's important to you, and taking care of yourself also throughout the day. And
Because you don't
so
take care of yourself, then all of it.
it doesn't matter. You
Some
can't
point.
do what you want to do,
Yeah,
right?
whatever.
So 1 to 5 minutes in the morning, just touching in, how am I doing? What's the one thing I need to do today? That's one thing that someone can start practicing right away.
And you say that, with your 5 pillars, which I love, by the way,
Yeah.
um, that now is more important time than any to start.
Yes.
Why do you believe that to be true?
There's a lot of ways that I think high achievers think like, well, if it's not perfect, then forget it. Like I won't
All or
even,
nothing.
yeah, it's all or nothing. And it really isn't. Every day is a new opportunity to put yourself on the path you want to be on.
Mhm.
The past is again prologue. It's the beginning of the story. It's not the end of it. So I like people to shift into this mode of leading themselves, right? And not just living, again, not being like, well, something happened to me, I'm just going to react to this, rather than, all right, I am going to be the actor. I'm not just going to be the main character in my life. I'm going to be the author. All right. I'm going to say what I'm going to do today. Yesterday, I sat on the couch, I ate like a giant pastrami hoagie. I feel sluggish, that's not an excuse to say, all right, well, now the rest of my life is couch and pastrami
Yeah,
hoagies.
I can't do
No,
anything
like
about it.
today is like, all right, today is a new day. Today
Develop
is
a
a
mental
fresh
fortitude.
day.
Hey, I did that. Now, if I did that, I need to do this instead. Have that
Exactly.
growth mindset and
Right.
focus on the process of it, not necessarily the.
Every day is a new chance to start over.
So when somebody's running on empty and starts leading himself again, what do you think the people around him notice for as far as changes?
I will say, I think the biggest change is that it makes it easier for people around him to relax. I think when you are working or have a relationship with someone who isn't there feeling their best, is stressed and uncertain and doesn't have a plan, doesn't have, I think, the sense of ease that deciding to work on yourself gives you. It can be stressful for the people around you because you're more erratic, and they don't know for sure if they can rely on you to be consistent
Sure.
in a daily basis. I think when you decide to start working on yourself and showing that you are putting that consistency in, it gives people not just yourself. You have more confidence in yourself, and that shows, and that ripples out. But I think other people have more confidence in you. Like this is
Right.
a person who has goals. They have a direction, and you can
I
relax
like that
into
with the
that.
direction. So let's go with that. And let's say within, 30, 45 seconds, can you give me what you would like somebody to walk away with today?
I would love for people to walk away today with the idea that today is the first day of the rest of your life. That you can make each day a fresh start.
Mhm.
And that the things that you do each day compound. That's the important thing. Consistency wins over intensity all the time. And if you can just do one small thing each day to keep yourself on the path where you actually are aligned, where you have that focus and that goal, you will be amazed at after 365 days what you've been able to
Small
accomplish.
changes.
Right? 1%, right?
I tell
1%
that's
better
when
every
with
day.
every client I tell them, I say, well, we focus on small changes day to day, and then 1 year from now, you're gonna look back and be like, who is that person? Because you're not gonna recognize them anymore. All right, so the way I like ending this is rapid fire. Here's how the rules are.
Okay.
No thinking, no explanations. First answer that comes to mind.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Trial or cage? Which one has taught you more about yourself?
Cage.
Cage. All right. Harder opponent, the person across the table or the person in the mirror?
Mirror.
Easily, right?
Yes, for
Easily.
sure.
What is more dangerous, a person with no discipline or a person with no direction?
Oh, no direction.
All right. I like that too. I agree. Which pillar do most people think they have handled when they actually do not?
Process over outcome.
Yes, I was
Yeah.
going to agree with that too.
Yeah.
Be honest. Attorneys or fighters? Who has the bigger ego?
You'll be surprised, but attorneys.
100. I would have guessed that. Some of the most humble people I've ever met are the best fighters.
Yes. Yeah.
Who is the biggest? What is the biggest lie high achievers tell themselves?
That your worth is your output.
Okay. What is the first thing that slips when someone stops leading themselves?
Their self-care.
Yep, easily. What is worse, being stuck or pretending you're not?
Pretending you're not by a lot.
Then you're lying.
Yeah.
If someone is listening, feels like they're running on empty, but has not taken action yet, what is the one word they need to hear?
It's 2. Green light.
Green light.
Green light.
Yeah, I was
Give
gonna say
yourself the
start.
green
I was
light,
gonna say
right?
start.
Just
Yeah.
start.
All right. And last one. When you look in the mirror now, are you closer to the person you were, or the person you're becoming?
The person I'm becoming.
I like that. It's always a way to look at it. No, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
And appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Zach. This was a blast.
This was a different kind of episode for us, and I think the audience needed to hear it. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Jess has operated at the highest levels: Ivy League Law, Marvel Studios, Disney's, a global tech company, and the MMA cage. She has seen what high performance costs when you do not have a system for leading yourself. And she built one. A framework grounded in neuroscience and performing psychology, the same mental operating system that elite athletes use to sustain performance over the long haul. What she is describing on the mental side is exactly what I see on the physical side every day. Men who did everything right on paper but are running on empty because they have no protocol, no system, and no standards for how they show up. On my end, we fix that data: blood work, wearable tracking, training, and nutrition built around your numbers. On her end, she fixes with the 5 pillars of fierce agency: growth mindset, action orientation, present moment focus, process over outcome, and mission alignment. One without the other is incomplete. You can have the best training program in the world, but if your mental game has no structure, you can't sustain it. And you can have the strongest mental framework on the planet, but if your body is breaking down because you have not looked at the data, you're leading from a deficit. If this conversation hits home for you, Jess has a book coming out in 2026 called Fierce Agency: How to Be the Best Leader You've Ever Had. I want you to check it out. And if you're sitting there thinking about physical side of this equation, you know where to find me. Rate us, review us, subscribe wherever you listen. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us reach more men who need to hear this. Stop managing your life and start leading it. I'll see you next time.